None will escape me.
Welcome to my channel. My name is ZZZ and I'll be your host today. Miyabi has been the most anticipated character release since the game's launch, and today, hoyoverse has allowed me to give you a look into what she is capable of with the early access from the content creator program. So in this video, I'll teach you about her abilities, teammates, W engines, drive disc, and more. Let's quickly go over her element and understand why it's so important for her. All of Miyabi's damage still counts as ice damage, but she is not the typical ice character, but rather she is our first frost character in the game. And it makes sense that she got this new variation, as it would have been very difficult to make ice stand out as an anomaly due to its poor anomaly scalings and also many enemies in the game resisting freeze. So by making frost, they have fixed these issues, as frost comes with a very powerful anomaly effect and much better scaling. And later on you'll see that almost everything Miyabi does, from her abilities, combos, and unique synergies, it will all tie back to her new element. So let's go ahead and start breaking down her abilities one by one, shall we? Let's start by looking at her basic attacks, as she will unleash a standard 5-hit attack sequence, with the first 2 hits dealing physical damage and the last 3 dealing frost, with the last hit also being able to block enemy attacks as well. And she will also be able to hold the attack button to do a special charge attack that will consume frostfall stacks, up to a maximum of 6 times, and each charge level does more AoE and damage. Well, moving on to Miyabi's dodge counter, she will evade the enemy's attack and dash through them, and creating space on the follow-up attack. And by holding down the dodge on its own, she will do a special dash that covers a large area in front of her, allowing her to chase down any enemy that's gotten too far away. Next is her assist skill, and she happens to have a standard defensive assist that changes animations depending on the strength of the enemy's attack. And the follow-up from this defensive assist will dash through smaller enemies and deal frost damage. But moving on to her special attack, Miyabi will draw her blade and slash forward, gaining resistance to interruption during the animation, but her EX special attack will have her rush forward through enemies, dealing a great amount of frost damage in AoE, and also gaining 2 stacks of frostfall. And with enough stored energy, she can follow up her EX special, dashing through enemies once more and dealing another burst of frost damage, and gaining an additional 2 stacks of frostfall again. But going to her chain attack, it will deal frost damage and anomaly buildup and a decent AoE to all enemies within range. But her ultimate will deal a massive amount of frost damage and an even bigger AoE, and also increase all of her ice damage by 30% for the next 12 seconds. And upon casting her ultimate, she'll gain 3 stacks of frostfall as well. And finally to her core skill, Searing Cold. Her core skill does many things for her and enhances part of her kit. Firstly, it will make her frost damage apply ice fire to enemies, and attacking enemies with ice fire will increase her anomaly buildup by 100% of her crit rate, up to a maximum of 80. It will also give her a separate anomaly gauge on enemies, which allows even normal ice type characters to trigger disorder with her. Next, this core skill will also allow Miyabi to trigger frostbite on enemies with ice fire already applied to them once the anomaly gauge is full. This will then trigger Frostburn Break, dealing a burst of frost damage based on Miyabi's attack and causing the enemy to enter the Frostburn state, while also gaining 1 stack of frostfall as well. And all enemies in the Frostburn state will accumulate 20% more anomaly buildup from all squad members. And finally, as long as there is at least 1 support or Section 6 character in the squad, Miyabi will increase her charge attack damage by 60%, and when any member triggers disorder, she will gain 2 frostfall stacks. And the next charge attack following a disorder will ignore 30% of the target's ice resistance. So the key to getting the most out of Miyabi's abilities is the management of her frostfall stacks, and making sure to not overcap and use them at the right times. But we can talk more about this in the team section. When looking at teams for Miyabi, some may think her best team is far ahead of the others, but I can tell you now that the teams I have tried so far all stack up with each other nicely. Firstly, Yanagi and Miyabi. Yanagi was seen as an easy skip by many players because we thought Miyabi was coming soon after. However, Yanagi has ended up becoming her best teammate in my honest opinion, as Miyabi really loves to have a teammate proc disorder as much as possible, and Yanagi is the disorder queen right now in ZZZ, so they end up having a natural synergy together with their kits. But many players may still ask, how can 2 on-field DPS work together? Well, to answer that question, Miyabi isn't a traditional on-field DPS like Ellen Joe. At M0, Miyabi is more of a quick swap DPS. This simply means that Miyabi is meant to be on field at certain times rather than hog all the field time to herself. You simply need to bring Miyabi on field in the following scenarios. A. To proc a disorder off a teammate's anomaly. B. Have energy to spare for EX specials. C. To use her ultimate. And D. To release her frostfall stacks once they are full. Staying on field with her the whole time when she is paired with another anomaly is a DPS loss, and not taking advantage of her biggest strengths. So the way she works with Yanagi is to keep up and manage anomalies on the enemy, and also her frostfall stacks. Doing this will make sure you're doing as many disorders as possible while also not overcapping on her stacks as well. So while I do believe after much testing that Yanagi is her best teammate, this team has by far the most switching and micromanaging in the game, as if you're not paying attention to the anomaly outping your enemies or overcapturing too often on Miyabi stacks, it can lead to this team underperforming severely, and trying to do all of this while also trying to stay alive against bosses can sometimes prove to be a challenge. But overall, I do think this team has the highest ceiling if players choose to master it. Now for the last slot on the team, you have 3 options. It's Caesar, Rina, and Sokaku. Now the pros of Caesar is she is the easiest to manage of the 3, but she also has a severe flaw. Caesar's shield only buffs the active character on field, and with Miyabi, her level 3 charge attack or enhanced basic attack has an extremely long animation, so swapping to another character is the most optimal play. However, because you switch to Yanagi, Miyabi will lose the attack buff from Caesar, so Miyabi's most damaging ability will deal less damage compared to the other 2 supports that can keep Miyabi buffed the entire time. So Caesar is the easiest and the most comfortable to play, but she does have the flaw of not being able to buff 2 carries at once like Rina. But speaking of Rina, her biggest pro is being able to buff Yanagi and Miyabi at the same time, but her biggest flaw is you now need to switch and manage even more than you had to before. This variant of the Yanagi Miyabi team with Rina is by far the hardest to play in my opinion, as now you have to manage everything mentioned prior with the 2 carries and Rina's uptime on her pin buff, and at M0 this is going to require a lot of switching. I can say that my best clear time so far has been with Rina, but I have also had to redo a lot of clears as well because many things can go wrong, from wrong switches or mismanagement of anomalies. So Rina is a great choice, but it will take a little bit more practice with her than the others. And finally for Sokaku, I can say she has surprised me the most. She can even beat out Caesar on average, as Sokaku can keep Miyabi buffed the entire time unlike Caesar, and Sokaku can also contribute to a lot of anomaly buildup for the team as well. And one of the biggest flaws of Sokaku being slower compared to other supports isn't as big of a deal with Miyabi, as swap canceling Miyabi's enhanced basic attack into Sokaku will have them both dealing damage and anomaly build at the same time, and by the time Miyabi is finished with her attack, Sokaku is also finished as well. So factoring in all of this, Sokaku is very competitive for this team, and is a great choice for people who already have, or will eventually get an M6 Sokaku on the Miyabi banner. And I'll be making a guide for Sokaku in the future as well. But at the end of the day, you should go with Sokaku, and Sokaku in the future as well, the support that you feel the most comfortable with. But 2 other teams that happen to be on par with each other are Bernice Lucy and Lighter Lucy. And I know many people will say, Lighter? But how is that possible? Well, it turns out the damage buff he provides for Miyabi is incredible, and it makes the undefeated champion completely on par with Bernice, as the Bernice Miyabi team has the team's damage split between the 2, while with Lighter, almost all the damage is coming from Miyabi. But the team's overall damage outputs are pretty much the same, as sometimes I'm clearing faster with Lighter Lucy, but the team that wins in each scenario is only 2 to 3 seconds ahead. That just shows that both these teams are on the same level, so just go with the one that you prefer. But I will say, if you want a team that's easier to play with less management, then Lighter Lucy is better for you, as Bernice can sometimes have energy issues compared to other teams, but both are extremely solid and very close to the performance of Yanagi and Miyabi. And finally, the last team I want to talk about is Lycan and Sokaku, as this was Ellen Joe's premium team on the game's release, and I can say this team has also performed amazing for me as well with Miyabi, but I only recommend this team against Ice Weak enemies, as its performance will drop off against other enemies. But the pros of this team is their ease of use, as you would treat Miyabi like a traditional on-field carrier in this team, but when it comes to Lycan, I actually recommend running 4-piece Protopunk or 4-piece Swing Jazz, as he won't be on field as long as he is on other teams, so getting another 15% damage bonus from one of these sets is really nice to have. These are the 4 teams I have tried the most so far, and I hope to have a video dedicated just for teams in the future for Miyabi. But let's move on to our W engine, shall we? Miyabi being an anomaly agent scaling more on attack and crit would make her engine options seem pretty limited, but thankfully Hoyo gave Frost a much better anomaly scaling compared to normal ice, so anomaly proficiency is actually a decent stat on her, making some of the options that have anomaly proficiency in their passive a lot better than they normally would be. Her best in slot is going to be her signature Wenjin, Hellstorm Shrine, as this Wenjin will help her attain the much needed 80% crit rate for her core skill, and it will also give her a staggering 50% combat crit damage. And it's important to note that this crit damage is only active in combat and will not show up on the character stat screen until she is in a fight. And furthermore, this Wenjin will also increase her ice damage by 20% once she and any teammate applies an anomaly to enemies, and this can stack up to 2 times. So her own W engine makes her easier to build and just completely synergize it with her kit. But if you can't obtain her signature, then the next best options are Fusion Compiler, Electro Lip Gloss, Roaring Ride, and Weeping Gemini in that order. But do note that Roaring Ride can be slightly better sometimes if you only have 1 copy of Electro Lip Gloss. And some honorable mentions are Rainforest Gourmet and any crit main stat attack engine, as Rainforest is just ever so slightly behind Gemini, but if you happen to already have a Rainforest already made and don't want to waste resources, then it should perform on a similar level in most cases. And for the attack crit Wenjin, it will definitely help you to reach the 80% crit rate that she wants. The downside is you're losing the passive, but until you get better drive disc, it can still be a suitable replacement. So Miyabi ends up having a good amount of choices for every player, and they can all get the job done very well. Let's quickly talk about our drive disc now. For every player who gets Miyabi, I recommend you farm her new set as soon as possible, as this set will also help you reach your crit rate needs and also give you a good amount of crit rate. And because Miyabi at level 60 has a base of 160 Anomaly Mastery, you will gain the entire passive of this drive set immediately. But the question is, should you go for attack or Anomaly Mastery in slot 6? If you are running her with another Anomaly character, Anomaly Mastery in slot 6 is giving me better clear times and also is consistent, so I recommend most players to run Anomaly Mastery over attack. But if you are running her with Sokaku, and Sokaku happens to have Freedom Blues on, I have been able to get away with attack in certain cases, and it will still perform around the same or sometimes better. But overall, I still just recommend Anomaly Mastery, as it is just by far the most consistent option. Now, since most people won't have enough good pieces in the first week of Miyabi's release, what can you run instead that can work on her? The answer is Hormone Punk, as it gives a lot of attack percent, and she can take advantage of the 4-piece very well. Now for the 2-piece set bonus, I recommend Woodpecker Electro, but if you can get enough crit rate with her new set, W Engine, and substats, then 2-piece Polar Metal, Puffer Electro, Hormone Punk, or the new set, Astral Voice, are all solid options as well. Miyabi has been a joy to play, extremely fun to experiment with, and also has surprised me in many cases. I think she is an absolute powerhouse at M0, and her mindscapes are not needed for you to get the most out of her. But if you love her and just want to invest more into her, then I recommend M2 as a solid stopping point. But again, they are not needed at all for her to get the job done, and I would definitely prefer most players to get her Winjin before you go for a single mindscape. But overall, I would say that Miyabi has lived up to the hype, and I can't wait for you all to experience her. Due to Miyabi's banner being extended to the entire patch, rather than just 3 weeks, I've decided it would be a perfect time to do a giveaway on the day of her banner, December 18th, and also 1 week later, December 25th, Christmas Day. Be sure to join the Discord, as I'll announce the winners there, and I also do weekly giveaways as well. And don't forget to check me out on Twitter at ZZZ, and be sure to subscribe for more Xenozone Zero content. And once again, thank you to Hoyo for letting me play Miyabi early. I hope I was able to help you. And as always, my name is ZZZ, I'm signing out.